Yes, today's topic is the glands. Like I will mostly speak about the types of gland, their classification, and also like focusing on the histological structures of different types of gland. And also that will include both exocrine and endocrine gland. But the first thing I want to start with is the classification. How you can classify glands. I mean, the first thing is we have to do is to see if it's we have two types of gland basically. One is exocrine, one is endocrine gland. The exocrine gland is, of course, is like you have the ductal system, which means that you have a duct which you secrete into the lumen. For example, let's say stomach or intestine or whatever, and also the mouth. And then we have endocrine gland, which is like they don't have a duct system, but to secrete their method, the secreta, it's basically into the blood system. So like I would say, like, when you see a gland, I mean, the classification of a gland should be done by this way. I mean, I think the best way to explain the classification of a gland is to kind of first of all you see the types of gland. Either it's exocrine or endocrine. Exocrine. When you see an exocrine gland, will be like this will be an exocrine gland. For example, exocrine. Yeah. Then you see, why is it exocrine gland? Because you have a ductal system. You see? For example, here's a duct and here's the lumen. The product is made here, and then they're secreted together the ductal system into the lumen, and that's why we call it for exocrine gland. Again, because of the duct system. Then you have, for example, other type, which is endocrine. I mean, in the embryological development, they have lost their ductal system. So they rather put their secreta into the blood system. For example, if you have this surface epithelium here, and then let's say this like embryological development, these endocrine glands will kind of lose their ductal system, so they will have no connection to the lumen, but rather to have their secretion into the body. Systemic secretion will be that they will secrete into the blood system. I mean, this is yellow, but let's say this is the blood, and their secretion will be going into the blood and systemic delivery to the whole system. The second thing to do is to see where the location of the gland is. Gland can let's say the first thing is like exocrine gland. The first thing we have to see, where is the location? Is the location between the epithelium? Let's say this is I'm really bad to draw, but let's say this is this is kind of a goblet cell. So there's secretion. So if you think about this one, how is it located? You see, of course, this is intra-epithelium. Of course, intra means inside the epithelium. So they're located intra-epithelium. But then again, if you see the structures of, for example, salivary gland, parotid gland, or anything like that, they will have their exvagination, and then they have a ductal system. I mean, of course, this exocrine gland. So if you see, of course, it's not located intra; it's extra-epithelial located. So they are like kind of extra-epithelial located, and then so there's the two things. You have intra-epithelial, like goblet cells, for example, or extra-epithelial cells, like extra-epithelial location, like for example, like exocrine gland of salivary glands. So the second thing would be, oh sorry, I should not take this off. Yeah. The second method would be the method of secretion. I mean, the method how they secrete their stuff, because either it's apocrine, holocrine, merocrine, ecrine, the different stuff of secretion. So then, first we saw the whole thing. This is an exocrine gland, right? It has a ductal system. This is exocrine, then it's extra-epithelial located. So the second is that, the whole thing. Second, the location, and of course we had the typing, because this is an exocrine gland. Exocrine, the duct system, and then it's extra-epithelial location. Then we go deeper into the system down to see how the cell are secreting the method of secretion, or how do they secrete their stuff. For example, let's take a merocrine secretion. Merocrine means that, for example, it just by exocytosis out to the lumen, for example, and then we have of course salivary glands, and salivary glands like parotid glands. And then we have holocrine secretion, which basically means the cell ruptures and release their the substances out to the gland, to the lumen, and then the example of this would be the sebaceous glands, which we have in the face and like most of the body. So, and then again, another example would be like apocrine, mammary gland. They secrete by this, the apical portion of the cytoplasma is disrupted, and then they release their substances outward. So we mentioned holocrine, merocrine, apocrine, and yeah, acrine is basically by diffusion, secreting outside by diffusion because of you know, like sweat glands is like one of the main thing, which is because you secrete so much fluid outside and then you have electrolytes, everything. So this basically I think it's by diffusion. I would say it's by diffusion. So that's like the location, then the method of secretion. Then if you see the third thing will be the structure of the gland outside. Is it tubular? Is it acinar? Is it, for example, is it compound gland, like the tubular acinar, for example, like the salivary gland in our, of course, salivary gland, the submandibular gland, which is located below the mandible. They have both mucinous secretion and serosecretion. So they have both tubular structure and also they have acinar structure. So then you have like compound gland with the tubular acinar secretion. So, like again, how is this gland? Like, is it one tube, or is it like multiple tube, or is it like other kind of acini located in here, or all these kind of things. So this is like the fourth thing we do, like to see the morphological structures of it. And then like the third thing would be like to see either blood vessel, for example, if you have a blood vessel and you don't have this connection up here, for example, and of course you have like one, yeah, like you have endocrine gland which secretes into the blood. And then of course, like beneath some of the exocrine glands, beneath the exocrine glands, you can also see, for example, the myoepithelial cell, which is very important for their secretion, because you know this is very strongly related by our autonomic system. For example, of course, when you're hungry and when you eat food, so this autonomic system is activated by parasympathetic, goes to, for example, to the myoepithelial cell. The autonomic nerve system secrete their stuffs into to the myoepithelial, and they contract. So when the gland contracts, of course, when the gland contracts, they put their stuffs into the lumen. So basically that's this, I would say, this classification, like myoepithelial, like four or five classification, like inside, like subclassification. So now I want to just focus. First part will be the focusing on the exocrine gland, and then we'll go further to the endocrine gland, and then in the exocrine gland we have to. I'm going to speak about the acinar. Then I will speak about the tubular acinar, which means that you have both tubuli, and then you have acini. And then we will speak about the tubular structures, and further from that one we're also going to speak about the sebaceous glands, which is like, you know, of course, holocrine secretion, and then there are, of course, alveolar. So I would say a lot of alveolar structure, because in alveolar structure you have both apocrine secretion and holocrine secretion. So the first thing I will start with is the salivary gland. We have like three major glands. I mean, in the parotid glands, which is located beneath, like here on this portion, and then you have some mandibular, makes sense because it's beneath the mandible, and then sublingual gland, which is beneath the lingua, or the tongue. And of course you have some main mineral glands there as well, but I'm not going to talk about these glands. So the first thing, I'm just going to give you some idea, like if you think about if you think about the parotid, submandibular, and also about the sublingual gland, it's kind of, you can understand like what type of secretion do they have. Is it like a serosecretion? Is it mucinous secretion? Or these kind of. So imagine this is mandible. I mean, it's a parotid gland. Then we go for the submandibular, and then we go for the parotid. So this kind of. So if you see a parotid gland, it's only a serous type of secretion. They secrete protein. For example, I will mention it after when I'm going to speak about the gland. So, but then they secrete only serous type of gland. Serous type of gland, yeah. And when we go down to the submandibular gland, we lose this like only serous type of gland. We have some mucinous. So you see, the portion of serous is lost in of course in this gland. The main thing, the main secretion method, or the main thing is the serous type of gland. And then of course some portion of that will be also mucinous gland as well. But then you go further down to the sublingual gland. Here, the majority of the serous type of gland is lost. So here, like you have, of course, minority of the serous type, and then you have mostly mucinous. So you see, like only mucinous, like slight, only serous, then slightly mucinous becomes here, and then you kind of completely lose, not completely, but the majority becomes mucinous here. So if you see the triangle, if you remember this one, you should find like, mostly serous, then becomes slightly mucinous, and then mucinous takes over mostly. So the first thing I'm going to speak about is the parotid gland. Parotid gland, for the parotid gland is the structure, of course. First thing, exocrine gland. Then we see how is the method of secretion, that they are extraepithelial located. Then we have the method of secretion is mostly in the merocrine secretion, because all the what I found was that what I think is mostly the acinar structure, they have mostly merocrine secretion. They do. So they have and then of course their structure as acinar structure. So what this gland does is to secrete a lot of protein into the saliva, and this protein includes of course amylase, which is also important for the digestion of the carbohydrates, and also some lysozymes as well. And then you have also proline-rich protein, which binds calcium and is very important for the health of the teeth, and also they have some antibacterial effect as well. And also remember that within the interstitium of these glands we have also some plasma cells, which are very they secrete frequently the IgA immunoglobulins, which is also very important for our immunity. So I will just kind of focus on their histological structure. So first thing, I'm just going to use this kind of virtual microscope. What is it called? So the important thing with the parotid gland is to identify, I would say, 4 types of structures kind of. The first thing would be to identify the acini, of course, acini, and then to identify the ductal system, intralabular duct, interlabular duct. That's the main thing to see. And of course, I will also explain some few things, but like imagine this is a gland. I will explain you the way how you get the difference between the intra, and then the ductal system basically. So for example, imagine this is a gland, a loop of the gland. Of course, some glands can have like 2 loops, for example, anterior hypophysis. You have anterior and posterior hypophysis, but then imagine this is a 1 loop, and then within this loop you can have septa, which divides this gland into lobules. So first thing is the whole thing is loop. Then the septa, which is of course connective tissue, and it's also very good actually, because then it keeps the small portion, it keeps the gland very what should I say, very very tight, kind of, So the septa is basically connective tissue which goes in from the capsule downward and divides this into, for example, let's say lobules. So we have loop and then you have lobules. So imagine this portion is a lobule. Right? So then we have to think about, okay, the duct system. So we have intralobular duct, we have interlobular duct, and of course these, and then we have the main duct, which is either going to the mouth or either going to the duodenum from the pancreas or these kind of. So let's talk about the intralobular duct. We are the duct system which is located in here. This system is divided into, for example, it's not like for all the exocrine gland, because for example in the usually it's do this right up here. Usually this system is usually we have 2 types of duct in the intralobular, 2 types of duct in the intralobular duct system. The one is, for example, intercalated duct. And let me just write it kind of a bit big, so it's much easier to see in camera. So it will be intercalated. Sorry to calated. intercalated duct. That's the one. I'll put one here. The second one is striated. Because the reason it's called, I'm using the word striate, but it's called striated duct. The reason it's called striated is because when you see the cell in the microscope in the basal portion, you can see kind of membrane invagination, because these cells are very important for the regulation of what is secreted. For example, in the salivary glands, mostly these glands regulate the amount of electrolyte that is secreted into the saliva. For example, that maybe, for example, sometimes if you have increased salivation, they will kind of secrete less amount of sodium, for example, into the ductal system. And of course, they usually do secrete a little bit, so not that much sodium compared to potassium. But that will be something which is not important. But again, so inside the intralabular duct, we have two types of duct: intercalated and striated. But then again, this is mostly. But then again, in some glands you don't have this thing. For example, if you go to the pancreas, the exocrine portion of pancreas. Remember the pancreas, both endocrine and exocrine. We will talk about that later. But yeah. So in the pancreas, we don't have the striated duct. That must be because you don't need that much regulation of the electrolyte secretion or the absorption or whatsoever. So this is for most of the glands. It's kind of intralabular duct is divided into intercalated, and then we have striated duct. So, but of course, for example, as I said, in pancreas we don't have this kind of organization. So then, for example, first, if I'm going to draw this one, because I'm really bad to draw, but I hope I can explain it kind of So, if, for example, let's say this is a gland or a portion, so, and then you have another one here. So this here, the apical portion, will be intercalated duct. Intercalated duct will further go into striated. Let's do this way. So, whatever. So this one and this portion is inter. I'm just going to write half of the words calated, but you will understand for sure. So intercalated duct. This portion is called intercalated duct. More intercalated duct goes in, combines and goes into striated duct. So and then you have more of these, for example, small proportions, which goes in together to make interlabular duct. So we see inside, then they combine together from the differentiated ducts combine. Like you have another one here, and then you have another one here, and then they go to make the big. I'm sorry, bad drawings, but I hope it's understandable. Yeah. So these glands, these ducts, striated ducts, more from the most portion. From the most places goes in and combines into form the interlabular duct. If you see the name inter means between the labules. Between. Intra, inside. Inter. So yeah, striated ducts goes into intralabular. And then for example from the interlabular duct, most of them come because you have so many lobules, as I draw that, you have so many lobules. So these ducts combine again to form the main duct, which goes into, as I mentioned before, into the mouth, or goes into the yeah. And I'm gonna also it's very important to see the differences between these ducts can also be seen in light microscope as well. So if you intercalated ducts, their cells are mostly cuboidal. When you go to striated duct, the cells are columnar with the basal invagination, because you have to increase the membrane, because invagination is mostly you increase the membrane surface area, so you have increased membrane, and then of course, as I mentioned before, it's very important for the regulation of the different electrolytes, because there you have a lot of activity of ATP, and then it's putting out electrolytes out of the cell into the interstitium, and then by diffusion or active transport is transported back into the into the cell and then further into the interstitium. But again, as I said, again, or may I like say it again, is that striated duct has like a regulation function. So striated ducts are mostly columnar cells. So, but further, when we go to the intralobular duct, these cells can be a micro. I'm going to show it in microscope as well. And these cells are like you can have the striated cuboidal cells, and you can have more like 2 or more layers of cuboidal cell. And these are, you can also see, the first thing you have to always look for is that first you see the connective tissue. You see the division of the lobules. You see the connective tissue is coming, because of course you haven't studied connective tissue yet. But then it's like kind of, you can clearly see that these are the glands, these are the gland portion, and then you see the connective tissue like lines. And then within this line, I will draw it for like make it very clear. For example, let's say this is a lobule. This is a lobule, and this is another lobule, for example. And here is, for example, very simplified structure. And then within this one, you have a lot of connective tissue. And in the connective tissue, you can see, for example, the interlobular duct, which is huge duct, and here you can also find blood vessels. You have seen the blood vessel before, how it looks like. I mean, artery, simple squamous epithelium, and then I have the tunica tissue. Yeah. So that is the thing. The intralobular duct, you can see, for example, within the connective tissue, which goes from septa, and then it divides this lobule into like lobule, and then it goes between, and then you can see clearly the connective tissue outline. The best one would be to show it here. You will easily find, because you see the connective tissue divides these into lobules, and then within this lobule you can maybe see it here. I will show you after, and then you can maybe see it here, that these ducts are like, they have more than one layer of cell. And then they can be striated cuboidal cells, and they have 2 layers or more layers. So let's focus on that. Yeah, now as I said, we're going to talk about the parotid gland. As it is located, the structure, I'm going to say it once more. The structure, they're located behind, like, in front of our chair or ear. And their function is to that they're one of the active or one of the major salivary glands. And their main secretion is serous type of secretion. Only thing you will find when you remember the triangle. Only the types of this only serous type of gland. And then they secrete a lot of stuffs, like, for example, amylase, which is very important for the digestion of saccharides, carbohydrates. And then also they have very much a lot of other proteins secretion, which is lysosomes as well, which is very important for the bacteria, the antibacterial effect, and then proline-rich protein. And remember also IgA, which is immunoglobulin, which is very important for our innate immunity. So the first thing we will start with is that to see the gland. So we will let's see. So you see here. And one thing I forgot as well to mention is also the type of cell. You have mucinous type of cell, then you have serous type of cell. Mucinous type of cell, of course, it makes sense that they have a lot of mucin in their cytoplasma, and mucin glycoprotein. And serous is that they have a lot of protein, which is, for example, for excretion out to the saliva, for example. So there's also once more. Sorry to. So we saw the exocrine gland. We saw this exocrine, this extraepithelial located. This has, for example, let's say, merocrine secretion. And then we see the cell here. Then we can also see either in microscope. We can either see that this is a mucinous or serous type of cell. So mucinous would be like they would be very much like very reddish, or very like what color should I say? Yeah, they were like kind of colored, very colored, compared to the mucin type of cells, and also their nuclei as well located kind of in the middle compared to the mucin type, which is located like mostly at the base. So again, we'll go back to the glands, parotid glands. So you see here, this is one acini. You see, it's very, of course, you can't see the lumen compared to the alveolar type of gland, where you can see the lumen very clearly. But here you can't see them, but you can also see that they are organized into kind of acinar structure. So this is an acinine. You can see it's acinine. Then I want to find a duct, which is, first I'm going to think is that I'm going to look for intralobular duct, which is two types of duct. Intercalated and striated. Let's go look for the intercalated duct. Intercalated duct, as I said, they have a cuboidal cells. So let's see what this is. So you can also see why it's called striated duct. You see the stria. You see, it's like very, like, you can see the base, it's very striated. You can see the kind of stria, and they're like columnar type, long kind of long cells. And I think this one, if you see, it's very cuboidal looking, cuboidal type of cell, very round, very like, I can't see any striation, and this is what we call intercalated duct. So let's look for, now we have two, we found both of them. We found intercalated duct and striated duct. As again, I would say striated duct, if you see the difference between these two, you can easily see the difference actually. You can see that, for example, that you have like at the base here you have stria, like, and they are long, and then in the cuboidal they are very round, and let me just find if they have another type. Anyway, I will take this one. And then you can also see, for example, that these cells are very round, and then they have, I can't see any striation. So, okay, then we will go for find the interlobular duct. As I mentioned, interlobular duct. You see here, it's very beautiful. I'm going to have to button. So, here we go. As I mentioned, they are striated, they can be striated cuboidal cells. You can see more than one nuclei. 1, 2. Of course, it's not simple, it's striated. And then you can also see that they are very big, and then they have the two layers. And always look for, if you see, for example, you see here's the connective tissue. Here's the connective tissue around. You see here's a blood vessel. Here's a blood vessel. If you remember, squamous, then you have this interelastic lamina. That's not what I'm going to talk about. So you see it here, for example. You see it's the connective tissue dividing, and then you can, if you have like a big view, you can easily see that these like structures are, for example, very easy to identify them actually. You see, you just go deep and you see different like striated layers, and then you will see. And of course, you see the mucinous cell, serous cell, which are very kind of darkish because they are very. Let me just find something in. Yeah, I think that should be. But then again, if you see the cell like very dark, and the nuclei like kind of located at the periphery or middle, but that's not that important, I would say. So I think we have that, and we spoke about their secretion. We spoke about how they are organized, how the structure is, and then I want to talk about now about the submandibular gland. Submandibular gland, the same thing as I said. Here you will find slightly more mucinous gland, because like mucin is of course very important. There's very hydrophilic glycoprotein, which is very important for our lubrication and everything. Of course, when we eat food, we can't just like put it in and dry, but then it must be lubricated to kind of go easily to and to not injure the mucosa of esophagus or esophagus and also stomach canals. So as I said, submandibular gland, mostly serous, and you will also find some mucinous. So we will talk about the submandibular gland. Submandible located beneath the mandible or below the mandible. Again, as I mentioned before, this triangle that you have serous, like the solid, only serous gland, which is parotid, and then you go further downward, you lose kind of a little bit the serous type of secretion, you gain a little bit mucinous, and when you further go down beneath to sublingual gland, you lose most of the serous type of secretion. So now, as I said, we will talk about submandibular gland. Submandibular gland, if you can see in this picture, you see dark, and some area is like whitish. This whitish area represents the mucinous gland. You see that you can very easily see the difference between mucin and serous. You see the cell, the cells like they're white, but this like very, very kind of like, yeah, dark color actually. So when you see in microscope very big view, and then you can see, oh, I can see the white area, then I can see the black area. Oh, this must mean that, and then you have to think, what's the majority? And the majority is of course serous type. So then you know this is submandibular gland. Remember the triangle. So and this gland I will also show you maybe more about this duct system, intralabular once more to make sure that you get everything, because to see everything very perfectly and fine. So let's zoom in there. First I will show you the mucinous. You can see them very, very, very easy compared to the serous type. See, they are like very colored, and this like they have slightly white color. And there you go. We have also duct, and I would say that this is intercalated duct, because I can see the cuboidal cells very clearly, cuboidal cells, and again intercalated duct. So now I want to also see if I can find some. Yeah, there you go. You see here, you see long cells that they're kind of long, and they have, you see, very long, and then they have, I can also see kind of striation. Compared to that, you can easily see the difference. These are like long cells with this like the basal striation. I mean, they have like the increased membrane surface area. So we found the different types of, once more, we found mucinous, we found serous, we found the ducts, we found like intercalated, then striated ducts, and the other thing would be to look for this beautiful structure. And I will say this is interlabular duct. See the connective tissue. You can easily see that this is connective tissue. Like, you know, a lot of connective tissue, a lot of proteins, a lot of extracellular matrix, you know, connective tissue, of course. So that's, and the serous type of secretion here is the same as the parotid gland, and of course here you have mucinous gland, so you will have more mucin, like slightly mucin secretion. So the next thing I will talk about is the sublingual gland. Here the majority is mucin. So in the microscope you will see a completely different picture. Like, so I'm just gonna take this one, sublingual gland, and it's very, very easy to see the difference. There you go. I mean, you can't miss that. I mean, you can't mistake this for anything other than mucin. You see a lot of, if you remember the same structure from the mucin, from the submandibular gland, you can also see that these structures are mostly, the mucin is dominant structure here. You have some, and you have also, of course, the ducts here. So I'm not going to speak more about that, but then I'll rather give you an idea that the majority of the glands here are mucin type of gland. So the next thing I will speak about is, go to some complete different area of the body, is pancreas. In pancreas, remember that not like always a gland do not have to be one type. You can also have exocrine, endocrine, and a pancreas is a perfect example. Of course, you have also our GIT system. In the GIT system, you have also like this kind of organization, but the pancreas is a good example. In the pancreas, we get like pancreas is like, you know, it's similar. If you can see, it's kind of similar to the parotid gland, but the different there you can see it very clearly. You can find the endocrine portion there. You will not, even if you look the whole day for it, you cannot find a striated duct. So let's go and look. And of course, the pancreas, we know that from our, even like from high school, we know that the pancreas, insulin, glucagon, somatostatin, a lot of hormones. These are the hormones. Then you have a lot of enzymes, which are like lipases, like peptidases, and different types of enzymes, which are important for the digestion of protein. And also amylase, of course, it's also important for those like in most of the carbohydrates, which are not like, because the majority of carbohydrates is digested in the intestinal tract. So again, they have hormones, endocrine portion, glucagon, insulin, we know that. Exocrine portion is the enzymes for the digestion of different types of food, carbohydrates, protein, fat, and everything. So remember these things. These are the function of pancreas. So the histological structure, as I said, it's similar to the parotid gland, but you can easily see the difference there. It's actually not easy, but I think you can also, I mean, if you look for the endocrine portion, that would be like easier to see the differences. You see, you would then easily mistaken for the parotid gland. But if you go very deep in, kind of at this level, let me see. You see you can also see kind of a whitish dots there, and these are the whitish dots. You see them compared to the other one. You can easily see it. These are not duct. These are not duct. I mean, nobody will mistake this for a duct. And this is called Eichlet of Langerhans. Again, Eichlet of Langerhans is the endocrine portion of pancreas. These are they have different cells, the alpha, beta cells there, and more other cells as well. And then their function, as I said before, is to secrete insulin and glucagon and other type of hormone. But again, see if you see from here, you can kind of, okay, first you say, oh, this is either parotid or pancreas. So what should I do? Just go deeper in. First, look for these structures. If you find this one, there you go. You have the pancreas. And if you look for also, for example, if you see here, these are cuboidal cells. So these are intercalated ducts. You will not find striated ducts there. Definitely not. So, as I said, the major difference you can see between the pancreas and parotid glands is to look for the Eichlet of Langerhans, which means this white, not whitish area, but these dots, like from very superficial, you can see these dots. And the second thing would be to look for the intercalated duct. If you see striated duct, that's not striated duct. That's that's something you're wrong. It's something histological wrong, or like during the preparation something has gone wrong. But in the pancreas, you will see the Eichlet of Langerhans, which is the endocrine portion of this gland, and you will also find acini, and then of course acini have merocrine secretion mostly. So, and intercalated duct, no striated duct whatsoever. So we are finished. So now, so far I will mix up a little bit. We spoke about acinar type of exocrine gland. We spoke about tubular, because remember that mucinous glands are mostly tubular glands. So what is sublingual gland? Tubulo-acinar gland, because they have tubule, which is the mucin, and they have acini, which is serous. So there you see the combined, and then of course acini, merocrine secretion. And I will focus more about on the tubular structures as well, because now I want to go into the I want to show you the histology of stomach, how the glands like, of course, they're tubular glands, and also to see the different types of cells there, because that's very important to know as well. So, but first some introduction to the stomach. The stomach is kind of they have different region, which I'm just gonna mention for fun. You have cardia. You have cardia, where the esophagus goes in. You have pondos, like, again, I'm very bad to draw, but let's draw like this. Anyway. So, cardia, pondos, body, and then you have pylorus. They have different types of secretion, because here you will find mostly mucin secretion, but here you will find the hydrochloric acid, because imagine, here comes the food, you need to kind of lubricate them more, so you have mostly in these two portions. Because if you think logically, you have to lubricate food here, and also you have to lubricate food here to kind of go easily to the different types of structures. So here you will find mostly in the cardia and pylorus, these glands are very similar, but that's not important, I'm not going to talk about that. But here is fondos, here's the fondos, and here is the body. They have very much you know, from our life experience that oh, I have like stomach pain. What's it called? When you have like upset stomach or like
Heartburn?
Heartburn, yeah. That's because of the hydrochloric acid. So once more, there are kind of, if we draw the surface epithelium, again, exocrine, we go deep. So this, then we have, I don't think it's important, but if you know it, it's much better. We have a muscular layer, muscularis mucosa. It's called muscularis mucosa, and here it's called, you know, here it's called lamina propria, and this both the structure above this is called mucosa. So when they say mucosa, you know two things: epithelium and lamina propria. When you see this muscularis strip of muscle, you can understand beneath this must be submucosa. So you know, beneath the mucosa, and then after that you can see a thick layer that is muscles, because for stomach you need muscle to kind of, you know, digest food and move them as well. So within this gland we have, you know, I think it's not important, but I will just mention it. The gland in the stomach is classified that you have isthmus, you have neck, and you have a base. But then these glands have different types of secretion. You have the gland, like at the apical portion, you have the mucous neck cells, as they're called, and then here you have a parietal cells, and then you have a chief cells. They have different function. Mucin cells, we know that as mucin secretion, and they must be very alkaline, because imagine you are secreting a lot of hydrochloric acid, so you must secrete like alkaline mucus to kind of, you know, to balance the acidity. So these secretes a lot of alkaline mucus, and then we have parietal cells. Parietal cells are the cell which secretes hydrochloric acid, and they also secrete intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor is important for binding to vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 has very much function in the body. I'm just going to mention a few. And one of the function is, for example, for the blood. If you have heard about pernicious anemia, it means that the blood cells are not synthesizing their DNA, so they become very large. But you know, that's clinical stuff. And they're also very important. Vitamin B12 is very important for the nervous system as well. You know that. So I think intrinsic factor, yes. So, and then sorry to forget. These are called chief cells or pepsinogen cells. Chief cells are the cell which secretes pepsinogen. These cells, you can see within these cells you will see kind of a granules. These granules are called zymogen granules. Zymogen granules are like like inactive protein, because come on, think this way. You can't have an active like enzyme which digests the proteins, you know, in the body, in the cell, because cell is full of proteins. So they are packed, and then they're like zymogen granules, which contains like in the body as well. Otherwise, they contain digestive enzymes. So yeah, and this pepsin is important for the digestion of protein. They are converting the proteins into peptide, you know. And also the hydrochloric acid, we know that if you have increased acidity or increase alkaline environment, you will lead to denaturation of protein. We need that because we don't want to absorb proteins, because if you absorb protein, it's like kind of some foreign thing, so our immune system will recognize that and attack on it. So everything is broken down into pieces, which is amino acid. So if you denaturate protein, no problem. So these cells, hydrochloric acid, like parietal cells, secretes hydrochloric acid, which denature, because of their increased acidity, denaturates the protein. These cells, which is pepsin cells, pepsin secreting cells, pepsin, remember, it's activated by hydrochloric acid. If you don't have hydrochloric acid, no activation of pepsin, you will lead to like your stomach, no digestion of protein, and it will lead to pain and whatsoever. So pepsin is activated by hydrochloric acid. These cells can be also seen very clearly in the microscope. So you see the structure, exocrine, tubular, different types of cells. Three types of, I mean, you have more, of course, you have some neuroendocrine cells here which secretes hormone because, you know, there's different regulations. That's not the thing I'm going to talk about now. Yeah, so in microscope, you can, as I said, you can see easily the differences between these two cells especially. So let's see what happens in microscope. So in microscope, we will see in the microscope. I mean, I will just show you once more what I was talking about the mucosa and submucosa. No, this one. So let's try it once more. So a stomach will be seen like this. As I said, this is mucosa. You see the line I was talking about? This is the muscularis mucosa. So beneath this one, you will have submucosa. And then you have the muscular layer. You can see, even if you don't know the histology of muscle, you can see that this is muscle. So this is called the muscular layer. And then you can also see, for example, so let me just see. Yeah, that's not important, but too detailed information. So now let's focus on this one. I will just find for you the lumen. It's called gastric pits. Gastric pits. And if you see the down portion, you can see that these cells are active. I mean, you can see that. So let's see. Do you see these like egg-type, like fried egg cells? You see here? These are called parietal cells. You see this one, this one, this one, this one. And these cells, as I mentioned again, and I will re-mention to like kind of make you understand, hydrochloric acid intrinsic factor, important for the digestion of protein, activation of pepsin by, hydrochloric acid activates protein, pepsin denaturates protein, and also this parietal cell secretes intrinsic factor, which is important for vitamin B12 transport. And next to that, the other cell will mostly be the pepsin secreting cells. Pepsin is also important for, again, important for the breakdown of protein into peptides. So you can see that these cells are, you see these light pinkish cells, these light kind of cells. You can easily, when you have a microscope, you can see them. Look at this one, like egg kind of. So when you cook an egg, this looks like that. But and then you can, next to that, you will see the chief cells. It's called as well pepsin secreting cells, chief cells. So that's the histology mostly of. Again, we have mucosa. We have a layer here of muscle, which is called muscularis mucosa. So whenever you see this one, you think this is a mucosa. And within the mucosa, as I mentioned before, you have epithelium, and beneath the epithelium you have lamina propria. And within the lamina propria, you have the blood vessels. You need blood vessels for epithelium, The blood vessel goes in like this into the lamina propria and supplies the epithelium cells. Because, when you take too much aspirin, you get ulcer. Have you heard about that? Ulcer and the ulcer. That's because of this blood supply is constricted. You produce more HCl, which damage the cell, and this creates a hole in the stomach, and it's called an ulcer. So, but again, see the cells here. When you see this structure, mucosa, submucosa, muscle layer, and then you go into this portion like this here or here, and then this is called the gastric pits. Like inside here is gastric pits. Beneath here you have the glands, which have these kind of. This is their morphology, parietal cells and chief cells as well. So this is the stomach, and now I want to talk about from the stomach. We got like gastric glands and everything. Alveolar glands. Alveolar glands are glands which have alveolar structure. So they have alveolar structure. Thank you. Well, I'm really bad to draw, but they will have this alveoli structure. two types of, I mean, as much as you have learned, or you need to learn two types of gland is important to learn. Sebaceous, which is branch alveolar, and their secretion method is holocoin secretion. They explode and they release their stuffs. And alveolar gland in the mammary gland. They have also alveolar structure, and their secretion is mostly by apocrine secretion. So now I want to focus on the sebaceous gland. First theory: the sebaceous glands is located in most of the body, but like in most part of the body, especially most on the face, they have they open mostly into the hair follicle. Hair. So imagine this is epidermis, sorry, and this is a hair follicle which goes in. And now we have, you know, the skin is two parts. We have epidermis, and below that we have dermis. Hypodermis is not part of skin. Maybe that's not, I don't think it's part of skin. But this hair goes deep inside. One clinical thing is that sometimes our body has very like good capacity to regenerate, because you know sometimes even if you go down submucosa and cut your skin down to submucosa, your skin will be normal after a while. Of course, it will not be that, but you will have like re-epithelialization, because cells from the hair follicle can go up and supply the layer which is lost. That's clinical stuff. So, hair follicle. Sebaceous glands will be here. Let's say this is branch. I'm sorry for bad drawing. Branch alveolar gland, holocoin secretion into the hair follicle. So whenever you look in microscope and you see hair, like you know, like a cell which is like this kind of in between. Let me just draw it here, much better. When you see in microscope, and then in the dermis you see, for example, a roundy thing which has like hole in here, and then they have a lot of cells around here. Then you know there's a hair follicle, and most of the time you will find the sebaceous gland there as well. I will show you here now. So the function of sebaceous gland is it's very protective, like it's protect the skin. They secrete a lot of also some cholesterol, squalene. They also some fatty acid. They have also they have also antimicrobial effect as well, that they protect the body, and they're also giving the vitamin. Via this you can know the superficial skin. They're also getting vitamin E. So this is basically the function of, and you will find there, like mostly on the face, you can find that these glands, like they have this oily secretion, which yeah, you can see that. But then I will show you these on the microscope, how they will look like. So here we go. We have skin. First, let's talk about a little bit like epidermis. Epi above the dermis. You see stratum corneum. You see no cells here. Then you know that this is epidermis. If you see some, first, I mean, mostly in a microscope, if you see kind of like this kind of, you know, the kind of separation between these layers, and you see no cells there, then it's, I mean, that's very good to say that this is for sure. This is for sure the stratum corneum, and stratum corneum you will find in the epidermis. So you see very much here. Then, and if, okay, in case you don't miss that one, and you have, let's say, I have like thin skin from the head, and then you can look for other structure, which are these. And as I said, this is a hair going in, hair follicle, and you see here we have the sebaceous gland. So as I was drawing, they open into follicle, and they look. So this is dermis. We are here. You see dermis. Then below us we have subcutaneous tissue, where you find a lot of fat, and there as well. So you see here, first thing you have to do is to see this epidermis, okay? See the stratum corneum, because of course you will mostly see the stratum corneum there. Then you look for the hair follicles. Where it's where you see invagination of the epidermis. And if you see that, then you have an idea. You know what? Here I should find sebaceous gland. And then if you see here, there you go. You have like a large something sticking, or it's like very easy. Very easy to identify these structures. So sebaceous gland. The function I explained earlier. A lot of oily secretion, important for the lubrication of skin, important for the nourishment of skin, protecting of skin, and as I said, they have some fatty acid which are important for the and they have antimicrobial effect. So the sebaceous gland is very easy to see. Branch, alveolar gland, holocrine secretion, of course the exocrine. And then where they're located in the dermis, opens into the hair follicle, and then easy to identify them, very easy to identify them. So now I want to talk about the eccrine gland. The best thing would be to talk about the sweat gland. We have two types of sweat gland. We have two types of sweat gland. The one type is apocrine, which we find in the axilla, the genital area, and these have this kind of smell because they secrete a lot of thick secretion, and then there are some bacteria which is helping us smelling bad, and they digest this one, and then they produce this bad smell. And then we have eccrine gland, which are gland secreting sweat. You will find them in most of the body area, except for the area which is, you can easily see that hair. On the lips, on the clitoris, for example. These area which is non-hairy area, So these area you will find, and this is very important. They have very much good, very much function in our body. Our body is that they can secrete electrolytes, different types of electrolytes. They have also very much important function for the regulation, temperature regulation, because from the physics we know that excreting water leads to kind of loss of heat as well. Some I don't remember the exact amount, but again, when we sweat, when we are warm in our body, it makes sense that we sweat, because you want to lose heat, because if you have increased amount of heat in your body, you can lead to different kind of complications. It means, for example, denaturation of protein and everything, and these, if you have that one, it will lead to kind of bad, a lot of complications. So again, important function is to release the heat from the body. So as I mentioned before, we have in the alveolar structure, we have, as I mentioned before, was the sebaceous gland, and another structure which is important to know is the mammary gland. In the mammary gland we can also find alveolar structures, So this picture we see is the mammary gland of a non-lactating woman. It means she's not lactating, she's not producing milk. You can easily, let's say the big view, you can see, for example, a lot of connective tissue, slightly alveoli, small ducts, but most is connective tissue composed of fibers, composed of fibroblasts, and also a lot of adipocytes as well. So so if we see the structure inside, again I will go through a lot of fibers, slightly alveoli. The alveoli are very kind of not dilated. So if you see here, this is a duct which is not that different. First thing is to see, as I told you again, see the whole overview. First thing, so see the whole overview. First you see that this is non-lactating, because you have so much fibers, so much connective tissue. So you see just in the small area we have this alveolar structures and ducts as well. So this is from a non-lactating woman. Now we go to the inner structures. We see that the alveoli are not that much developed, and the duct system are just slightly, you see slightly ducts, and then again, what I mentioned more, the alveoli are not that much developed. So this is the mammary gland for a non-lactating woman. But if we see the structure for the lactating woman, we see the completely different picture. We see that these structures predominate. We have a lot of them here. This is because of the different hormones. So this progression or this development of this structure is basically of the different types of hormone. For example, for alveoli we have progesterone. For ductal system we have a lot of corticosteroids, prolactin, growth hormone, everything. So these hormones during the pregnancy develops the mammary gland to produce a lot of alveoli, produce a lot of ducts and everything. And then again we will see a completely different picture, which I will show you now. But first, as I said, I'm just going to re-say most of the things. You see the connective tissue, you see the duct system is not that much developed, alveoli are just very small. And if you see, for example, in the my English is not good written, but anyway. So when we see that this one, we see a completely different picture. You see how much these structures predominate, slightly connective tissue. Most of these structures, the glandular structure, we have alveolar, okay, again once more I will say. You can see the division, they are divided. You can see the lobules divided by the septa. And then you have, once more, most of these glandular structures slightly connective tissue. So let's go deeper into what we see in these lobules. So these structures, if you see, for example, so I will just show you kind of how you can see if this is alveoli or this is a duct. I mean, that's obvious, but one more thing is that within the alveoli, it's very hard to see here, but within the alveoli, for example, you can see kind of, if you see here, it's like long cells. And this is again myofibroblasts. These are important for the contraction of the alveoli to secrete their stuff into the duct and further into the baby, let's say. So again, you see the alveoli, you just see a simple epithelium, and then you see, for example, beneath that you can also see kind of cells which is running downward, and these are the myofibroblasts. But this structure cannot be found within the duct system. This is a duct. You see here, these are multiple layers. It's not one layer. And you also see some secretion as well. This is protein secretion. So multiple layers, like striated layers, then they're large alveoli. Beneath that you have myofibroblasts. So another thing I wanted to ask was to say was that I mean, this myofibroblasts again is related by the hormones, different types of hormones. And as I mentioned before, you have lobules divided by the septa, which becomes into one loop, and multiple loops, makes the mammary gland. So this is actually very simple to see. In the mammary gland, we know the function of it, and again, they are apocrine. So alveolar, in the alveolar category, we have holocrine, which is sebaceous. We have mammary gland, which is apocrine. So apocrine, I think it's very easy to understand this, how you can see in microscope. See first, you see the whole picture, then you go see this one. Well, let me see if it's a duct or is it alveoli. First thing you see, layers. Oh, now I'm in the right position. I think this alveoli, but let me be sure. Then you go down and see this kind of a squamous kind of cells, like they are very tiny beneath this alveoli. And when you see this one, then you see, you know what? I'm seeing alveoli. But then when you go to this big structure, like you can see these are very dilated structures here. Then you see, let me be sure if it's a duct or what. But then you see a multiple layer, and you can say that, you know what, I'm seeing duct. So this is the exocrine portion. We mentioned the acinar structures, which is mostly the parotid, which we also mentioned the tubular acinar structure, which is in the submandible. and also slightly in the sublingual as well, but mostly sublingual is less tubular structure. We went further down to the stomach. We saw the tubular structures there. We saw the different types of cells there, parietal chief cells, chief cells, and further we went to also see the difference between the pancreas, because pancreas most of the time is going to be like mistaken for the parotid gland. So now you can see that if you see this, like if you are confused if this is parotid or pancreas, you know what to look for: islet and the ducts. No straight ducts in pancreas. So now we will talk about the endocrine. We already went to the endocrine in pancreas. Pancreas is a mixed structure, endocrine and exocrine. So again, not all ducts, not all the glands are only one thing. Like they're not. I mean, of course, most of the time they are. But if you get a question that, are they always like one type of gland? I mean, one type of gland, one leg is only exocrine. But you should say no. You can also find like gland with, like a structure like pancreas with both exocrine secretion and endocrine secretion. So now we will talk about endocrine secretion. Pancreas mentioned, so nothing to talk about that. Endocrine secretion, they have systematic effect. They are released into the blood, and blood distributes them into everywhere. Insulin. You do not need them in the intestinal tube. You need them in the blood to go to the heart, adipocytes, to go to muscles, and everywhere. Either to put the glucose in, or to put amino acid in to kind of to build anabolic function. But now, since we don't have that much time, so I will talk about two types of important things. Just make you where we can find endocrine glands. Most of the time, if you think about like gigantism, you have surely heard about that. Or you have heard about a tumor in the brain or something. This is called hypophysis. So the first endocrine gland we have is hypophysis. We have anterior and posterior. So hypophysis is endocrine gland. They secrete their stuff into the blood, and then distribute systematically. Either it's growth hormone, it's follicle stimulating hormone, and a thyroid stimulating hormone, or any kind of these hormones into the blood, into the system. So further we go down, you have heard about thyroid. Oh, this guy is so skinny because he has hyperthyroidism, or he is, anyway, you know that you have surely heard about thyroid. Thyroid is located here, and the function is to, of course, release T3, T4 thyroid hormone. And behind that one we have another gland, which is called parathyroid, and they are very important for the secretion of PTH, which is parathyroid hormone. Para means like, the middle, like next to thyroid. And this hormone is very important for the regulation of the calcium metabolism in our body. Very important for the calcium metabolism. And if you go further downward, I can't see any structure like major structure. Of course, you can find some of the endocrine gland in the lungs, but if you go further downward, we can find another structure which is called suprarenal gland. If you think about supra, means above the renal. This will lump renal, and this located above the renal. And this then secretes different types of hormone, corticosteroids, epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, everything. They secrete that one. So further we go down to ovary for women, estrogen, other hormones, men, testosterone, but the thing I will focus on is mostly on suprarenal gland and also thyroid, because I think it's important to know. So let's begin with the thyroid. Thyroid gland is a gland which is again located here, and this gland has a function of secreting thyroid hormone. And one important thing is to also mention that within thyroid gland we have also another types of cell which secretes another hormone. It's called calcitonin, which is also important for the calcium metabolism. And these cells will be found between the two follicles of thyroid, because you have the two kind of follicles. Between here you have parafollicular cells. Para. They're located outside the follicle. Calcium metabolism. So if you see the best thing to explain would be to see the structures in a microscope, what we see in a microscope. The thyroid hormone is important for very much things, and one of the potent activator of secretion of this of this hormone is cold. When you're freezing, you need to be warm. And to be warm, you have to increase the metabolism. And to increase the metabolism leads to increased heat, which means that it's good to have this one. So a thyroid gland, like superficially, will look like this. But then you can also mistake this. I mean, not always, but sometimes you can also say that, you know, from above, you think that this gland can look like a sublingual gland. But then again, just zoom in and see if it's look like sublingual gland. No, it doesn't look like sublingual gland. Definitely not. You can easily understand. These are called follicles. You see, this is follicle. This is this secretion. Let me just zoom in more. So this is one layer of cuboidal cell surrounding this follicle. One layer of cuboidal cell surrounding this follicle, one follicle, second follicle, and within here you can also find this other cell which I mentioned, parafollicular cells. Here you will find it. This secretion is called colloid, because whenever thyroid is secreted, it's like a protein which is secreted into this colloid, and then further it's thyroid is put in there, like iodine is put in there, and then when this protein is processed, and then you cleave this protein to different things, and then you gain thyroid hormone, which is secreted into the blood, because this is interstitium. You have basal membrane, sorry, can't see basal lamina in microscope obviously, but and then basal membrane, and then within here interstitium always you have the blood vascular supply. So thyroid gland can be easily recognized by this one. You see the colloid, lumen, you see the cuboidal cells, you see, for example, different structures, and then you should not know that, but here within here you also parafollicular cells, and I think that's very easy to recognize the structures actually. And now I want to talk about the suprarenal gland. Suprarenal gland is located above the kidney, as the name says. Supra, above, renal means kidney. First, I will just mention there, because in this it's very easy to. In this gland we have different zones. We have 3 or 4 zones, you can call it. Above it we have a capsule. Most organs have a capsule, you need to pack them, otherwise it's dangerous. So beneath the capsule you can see the cell, you can see the organization. You can see light kind of cell. I'm just going to give you how you can see them in a microscope, easy to recognize in a microscope. So first you see this layer. You see the cells are like organized transverse, and like you can see the difference. This is a columnar kind of organization, but here you see more light, here you see more dark, and then you see more like, color, not dark, but color. So this layer is called zona glomerulosa, or it's very hard to say the name of this zone, zona glomerulosa. But yeah, the function of this zone is to secrete aldosterone. Aldosterone in the body has very much function. Their function is mainly to kind of absorb the sodium with water, increasing the blood pressure, not always, it's important, yeah. And then they have also function of secreting potassium out to the renal tubules, to go into the urine, and also they secrete also acid, H+ into the urine as well. So this zona glomerulosa, function is to produce aldosterone, which has different function in the body, mostly to cause increased blood pressure when you have a low blood pressure, or when you have increased amount of this hormone, you will also lead to increased blood pressure. So then we have this light zone, a big light zone. This is called zona fasciculata. This zone has a function of secreting corticosteroids. It means cortisol, for example. Cortisol has different function. Have you heard about, like, in the morning when you wake, you have a lot of cortisol? The cortisol has different function. The function, they have also same function as aldosterone, but another function of that they increase hyperglycemia. It means that they increase the amount of glucose in the blood, and this is done by, for example, different or function either by decreased burning of glucose, increased gluconeogenesis, it means producing glucose from protein or protein mostly. So the function is hyperglycemia. This is a stress hormone. This released in stress makes your body prepare for stress, because when you have hyperglycemia, you have like kind of, and then if you have a stress, hyperglycemia, you can also lead to development of diabetes mellitus, because in this situation, when you have increased amount of glucose, it will also lead to increased insulin, because when you eat, insulin is increasing because of the increased amount of sugar in the blood. But again, in this here, insulin resistance is developed because this hormone does not want to have decreased glucose in the blood. So insulin is not working because you have increased amount of insulin, so you develop insulin resistance. So insulin is increased, glucose is increased, and you also increase fatty acid in the blood. Most of the metabolism done by burning the fatty acid. And again, this is a stress hormone. So we go down to a zone beneath that one, the zona reticularis. These zones secretes androgens. They have understand then different other androgen, which has an important function in the body, and also estrogen as well. Beneath this zone here, now we mentioned 3 layers upstairs: glomerulosa, fasciculatas, reticularis, medulla. This is part of the autonomic nerve system. The function of this zone is to release epinephrine, and also some dopamine. And epinephrine, we know from the body, our experience, that it increases your blood pressure, increases your heart rate, increases your heart pumping capacity, and different things. So this is a part of our autonomic nerve system, even it's not located in the autonomic nerve system. And so this is, so you can also see the differences in the slide. I mean, in the microscope, you see first, like if you have a big picture, you can see that first you see the cells are look like upstairs, like more darker than below. Then you have columns, and then you have the zona reticularis, which is kind of dark as well. I will not go into how they are organizational. I'm just going to give you an overview about how you can recognize it. So, what's the zona glomerulus, fasciculata, reticularis, medulla. So you know the function of medulla: epinephrine, dopamine, and those kind of function. And these are very important for our body, because sometimes you need most of the times you need epinephrine and also cortisol. Aldosterone, of course, we have low blood pressure. The aldosterone is increased because of different mechanisms, and it will lead to increase in the blood pressure. So I don't have anything else to say. I'm just a student video. So any mistake, we are glad to hear, and I hope I did well. Thanks.